Welcome back as we continue our panel discussion with regard to the budget that comes up later this afternoon. As we continue, Mr. Mufamadi, earlier on we spoke about the option of partial privatization of state-owned enterprises. Is that an option for government?
Well, I've done some research. Tied to that, I must say the president has given a message of hope that we are moving towards the industrialization of our country. And you can't, when you speak about industrialization, at the same time think of privatization of state-owned enterprises. Because historically, it has been proven that state-owned enterprises led industrialization in this country before 1994, in the manufacturing sector, supply of goods and services, and so on and so forth. So it will be important for us to cement the role of state-owned enterprises and development finance institutions. They should complement each other in terms of industrialization of our own country. The message that we got from the president was that there's a better tomorrow in South Africa, and there's always hope. Let me also indicate that there were some concerns when the president last year in the State of the Nation address said we target 500,000 jobs over a period of a year. Now, in the State of the Nation address, he indicated how many jobs were created, over 300,000. Now, it's always better to have a target. And I think state-owned enterprises should play a very critical role in terms of skills development, not just infrastructure investment. We need skills in this country. You need ESCOM, you need your SASOL, you need everybody, your DFIs, to then say this is what we are going to do. But how do we fund infrastructure? I think it will be important that using the financial muscle of these institutions, of course, state can actually work or come as a guarantee in terms of raising capital in the open market. But finally, it will be important that they remain in the hands of the state to direct and lead private sector investment.
Mr. Harris, is the minister likely to push up taxes as an option?
We would think that would be quite a bad idea. We think South Africans are already overtaxed, and we don't believe if we increase taxes, it might actually lead to less tax revenue because you'd start losing that culture of tax paying in South Africa. And that's a very precious thing. You can see what happens when you lose a culture of tax paying by what happened in Greece and Italy in the last few months. But the number one thing we're looking out for in the budget today is the president to reaffirm that the youth wage subsidy will be implemented on the 1st of April. The Treasury committed last year to an implementation date of 1 April, and yet we hear that COSATU is apparently refusing to discuss the youth wage subsidy at NEDLAC. To us, this is a very important marker. We absolutely think that wage subsidy needs to be introduced. It will help create jobs for the 3.2 million unemployed young people in South Africa. That should be the number one priority of this budget.
What's your take with regard to what Mr. Harris is saying?
No, we absolutely agree that the youth wage subsidy should be implemented. We are concerned about the delays at NEDLAC. This is a way of bringing in the youth on board and of finding employment for them. Of course, we also support the expanded public works program, which seeks to employ 250,000 community workers for 2 to 3 days a week. That, we believe, is a phenomenal plan, and it has already been implemented. So we see positive signs of bringing people on board as far as employment is concerned. That is, of course, our number one priority to address unemployment and poverty in our society.
Mr. Swart, a huge chunk of the budget goes to social grants. Should the minister consider cutting there a bit?
Well, we understand in the short term that social grants are very necessary. As government has said in the past, and which we fully agree, we can't have that culture of dependability on social grants. We've got to have employment. We've got to move away from the social welfare state. But until such a time as we have economic growth that translates into job creation, there are numerous people in South Africa that are dependent on those social grants, and we would trust that there will be a slight increase to address cost of living in those social welfare grants.
Mr. Mufamadi, job subsidy and the possibility of cutting social grants, can we continue to afford?
Well, if there's one area where we've got sufficient consensus amongst all of us as South Africans, is that we should find a way to deal with unemployment, particularly as it affects young people in this country. That, I don't think there's a debate around that. We just have to find a way to deal with that. And I think even today the minister will still expand on what he actually tabled last year in terms of his budget, in terms of youth unemployment, how we deal with it. In terms of social spending, unless we don't live in this country, you know, if you are part of us, you go to Masisi, you go to Thohoyandou and other places, you then understand the need of intervention by the state in terms of social grants. Yes, there'll be pockets of abuse there and there, which may not necessarily be by the people who are beneficiaries, probably civil servants, and the state has proven that it's dealing with the issue of corruption as it affects these social grants, particularly in terms of civil servants. So at this point in time, yes, we agree, we see that it is important to start striking a balance between social security grants and economic growth. But at this point in time, it cannot be an option even to start thinking that we should cut back in that area, because our people definitely really need this intervention by government.
We are running out of time. Just briefly before you go, Mr. Mufamadi, we've heard very little about how the national health insurance is going to be funded. Are we likely to hear some substance in today's budget?
Definitely, but what I want to probably send as a message to the public, one, is that there's a green paper. The green paper lays the foundation and the basis on which national health insurance is going to unfold in this country. It's not an event, so we should not be expecting that there'll be billions and billions of rands that will actually be tabled today or announced to do that. One, we are dealing with the infrastructure. We have to prepare ourselves for a national health insurance in this country. You need to have proper hospitals. You need to have proper clinics. You need to train nurses and doctors. So the amount of money that would actually expect today, it is in line with the building blocks of national health insurance.
Mr. Harris, finally and briefly in 30 seconds, your tip for the minister.
A tip for the minister is to introduce tax breaks for small businesses, to make it easier for South Africans to start businesses, to cut red tape, and frankly to manage their cash flow. There are ways that we could introduce tax measures to help small businesses.
Address wasteful expenditure. Let there be more cohesion amongst the law enforcement officers so that we can fight the corruption and wasteful expenditure, and in so doing, reduce the tax burden on our nation.
Very briefly, the final word from you, Mr. Mufamadi.
I think the minister should continue with the counter-cyclical policies that have enjoyed the South African economy up to now, but also to pay specific attention in terms of the possibility of provincial fiscuses impacting negatively on the national fiscus. So there is a need to look into provincial governments and local government as to whether their provincial fiscuses are not going to affect the national fiscus at the end of the day.
Mr. Mufamadi, Mr. Tim Harris, Advocate Steve Swart, thank you very much, gentlemen. And that's all we have time for today. Until we meet again tomorrow, goodbye.